right. So we start scaling, we start buying duplexes. At what point you're still working a W-2 job? I want to talk about that transition of at what point, like, how many units or whatever metric you want to use, did you say, this is it for me? I'm leaving the W-2 IT job. I'm going to do this full time, and just talk through about that mindset and that leap.
Well, for me, two things kind of collided. One was, I had for years been kind of thinking about real estate, looking at real estate. A family friend, somebody who had been a residential broker for years, who had bought some real estate. We had talked for years about buying things. And in 2002, she came across a property. It was actually two properties in Hyde Park, so a total of 40 units. And she approached, her and her partner approached a few people, including me, to look for money. It's a bit of a longer story here. The details aren't relevant. It ended up being one building. So they kind of kicked out all the friends but me and said, hey, it's only the one building. We want to keep you. And by the way, we want you to be the one to care and feed for it. These were two women kind of at the twilight of their career. That was 2002. If you remember the whole .com bubble, I had left the company I was with to go for another company in a sales business development role. At that time, it was like selling ice to Eskimos. There was just no business to be had. So I closed down this 20-unit building. It was in Hyde Park, 5219 South Drexel. So here's where the Drexel story comes from. And after I closed down the building, company I was with kind of said, we got to cut back. You were the last one in. You're the first one out. They made a nice deal to me. And then I got phone calls literally from four people saying, hey, I heard you bought that building. Are you looking for investors? I know you're interested in real estate. We'd like to invest with you. And I just at that point jumped in with both feet. And that's what got me going.
Awesome. So we buy that building, we buy a few more. At what point does this, you're on your own. At what point are you like, all right, I need a bookkeeper? And Mark, I'd love for you to chime in too, because you guys have both gone down this path. And a lot of our listeners are probably, 3, 4, maybe, this is happening to them in the near future. They're going from 10 units to 50 or whatever it is, and they're gonna have to start hiring or making strategic decisions. So talk to us about that scaling process, because it's something we don't cover on here a lot.
So I bought 5219 Drexel, and then I was starting to look for the next building to buy. And I stumbled on a building that was at 79th and Drexel. Interesting neighborhood. That was 42 units, I think, in that building, huge courtyard building. And then I had bought another building after that. And at that time, I was hands-on. I was doing everything. I was plunging toilets, doing whatever was necessary to keep things operating, right? That's what we do when we first get started in this business. In the meantime, I have to think back through, but I bought a couple other buildings. There's another story that I'll get to in here in terms of how things evolved. But when I got started, Tom, you and I were just talking about this a few days ago. You start a business, any business, what do? You go buy QuickBooks. I bought QuickBooks. And then I ended up migrating to another platform called Tenant Pro before settling on AppFolio a few years later. In the meantime, I had about 4 buildings. So I had about 100 units. And I'm going back to that 79th and Drexel building because I didn't know really where to look for a skilled person. I really didn't even know what I needed other than somebody to do essentially data entry for me. And at this building on 79th and Drexel, there was a tenant there, a young woman who was in her mid-20s, late 20s. And I was there all the time, right? This was my second building I had. And she would head out in the morning with a gym bag, and she would go and work out, and then she would go to work. I recall she worked at 𝗲𝗃𝗃. And I was just sort of impressed with the sort of ethic that she had. So I approached her and said, hey, I need a bookkeeper. And for a period of time, I had this girl who lived at 79th and Drexel coming all the way down to my house, which at that point was actually that 2-flat that I bought. I didn't mention that I converted that to a single family home. She came to my house for about 6 months. Then I finally found an office space that I had her working out of. but that was my first employee, and they did data entry essentially for me, and kind of managed the books and paid bills, while I still did the tougher stuff like balancing the checkbook.